The other thing is that both the book and the documentary they're two different looks at the same material. So first of all, Arthur and I don't agree on everything, and I think that's a good thing. The book is not intended to be a companion book to the documentary. It is intended to be a separate work, related, of course, but there are things that you can do in a book that you just can't do on screen, or not without an unlimited checkbook. There are parts of the story that we just couldn't get into in a 100-minute documentary, and doing the book really allowed me to do that. So for the Titanic geeks, among us, both between the three of us and in the listening audience, it really goes much deeper into how did these men potentially escape from Titanic. So,
welcome to Season 3 of Titanic Talk. Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd launch once again onto the digital airwaves with some very special event episodes. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and continue to explore all aspects of the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic, groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Actors, historians, authors, descendants and fans come here to talk about Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams. Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries is distributed in the US by Freestyle Digital Media. It's now available to rent or own on Apple TV, Amazon, and many other platforms. Please be sure to like and leave a review.
I'm Nelson Aspen, and welcome back to Titanic Talk. And we're also going to, in addition to welcoming you back, audience, we're going to be welcoming back one of our family of friends, previous Titanic Talk guest, a very distinguished gentleman, and it's our honor to have him back with us today. My lovely co-host, Alexandra Boyd, the filmmaker behind Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries. Will you do the introductions?
I certainly will, Nelson. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, again, to coming back for season 3. I feel like I have to personally say that as well. It's lovely to be back. And it's lovely to be back with Steven Schwankert, fellow filmmaker, fellow documentary filmmaker, fellow director, writer, author of The Six, which is the most fascinating, I would hesitate to say previously untold story about the 6 surviving Chinese passengers on Titanic. And he's here to tell us about that and an exciting announcement he has. Steven, welcome back to Titanic Talk.
Good to see you, Steven.
well, thank you both. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Nelson. And allow me to congratulate both of you, Alexandra, on the release of Ship of Dreams on Apple TV Plus. It's just fantastic to see your work finally getting the attention that it deserves, and hopefully the wider audience that it sought to attract. And Nelson, of course, the publication of Kindred Spirits, a genuinely original Titanic story. So I'm humbled by the company.
Oh, thank you. This is kind of like we're at the Algonquin Round Table on Zoom.
As creatives and artists and storytellers, first and foremost, we're storytellers. It's a bloody long journey to get to where we are, and you staying the course is clearly the key. We're all still here and all still producing things for people.
And bound by the common denominator, which is Titanic. And Steven, the first time we spoke with you on Titanic Talk, it was about your documentary film, The Six. Now you're conquering other platforms. And just in time for the upcoming Titanic anniversary, we're recording this just prior to the April 2025 anniversary, but you may be listening to it at another time. But Steven, what's in the works?
So yes, it's Titanic season is upon us once again, and time to get the Titanic tree out, and it's so finally when we started out working on The Six, my director and creative partner Arthur Jones and I, when we started out the way we had worked together before, which was that we would create a common body of research and that he would make a documentary out of it and that I would write a book. And as Alexandra, especially as writing or creating a documentary is exceptionally labor intensive, certainly not cheap. And for that reason, the documentary had to take it had to take precedence. So there are certainly times when I wish I could have been writing, but the documentary was in production and we just had to do it. You have the time, you have the resources. Okay, let's go finish it. So the book took a little bit of a seat on the back burner, just while all of that was going on. And the other thing is that both the book and the documentary they're two different looks at the same material. So first of all, Arthur and I don't agree on everything, and I think that's a good thing. The book is not intended to be a companion book to the documentary. It is intended to be a separate work, related, of course, but there are things that you can do in a book that you just can't do on screen, or not without an unlimited checkbook. There are parts of the story that we just couldn't get into in a 100-minute documentary, and doing the book really allowed me to do that. So for the Titanic geeks, among us, both between the three of us and in the listening audience, it really goes much deeper into how did these men potentially escape from Titanic. So just a quick overview for those of you who are not familiar with the story. There were 8 Chinese passengers on Titanic. They were not stowaways. They were not members of the crew. They were fare-paying passengers. Out of those 8, 6 of them survived. Now, for foreign-looking, and by foreign-looking, I mean non-European-looking, for foreign-looking third-class male passengers, that is an exceptionally high survival rate. And that was something that grabbed me and grabbed Arthur from the beginning. How did those men survive in that environment when third-class passengers are arriving at the boat deck so late, when even European men were having trouble surviving and getting into lifeboats? What explains this? And then the other big mystery that we were looking to solve is what happened to them afterwards, and why don't we really know anything about their story? With all due respect to our Irish friends, it seems like every Irish villager that was on Titanic has had a biography written about them. Now, of course, I exaggerate a bit, but there really is a lot of information out there about passengers that you think otherwise wouldn't get any attention. But with our Chinese survivors specifically, there was so little known about them. And I was living in China at the time. Arthur's still living in China. And for us, it was just a story that grabbed us and we felt we needed to do. So I'm pleased that finally, after all this time, the book has found a home with publishers both in the UK and the United States, and that we'll be able to go into a little bit more depth in the story than the documentary was able to do.
One of the things that I loved that came out of your documentary was finding the descendants in China who had absolutely no idea about their connection to Titanic. Talk a little bit more about that. Were you able to explore those individuals, those families a bit as well?
The most difficult part of the story really was taking the list of Romanized names, of anglicized names that we got off the passenger manifest, and then working both backward and forward to find some link to today. There just really was almost nothing out there. I couldn't believe that during the 100th anniversary that nobody had put up their hand and said, my grandfather was a Titanic survivor. And, I just couldn't believe that. And I didn't believe that there were no descendants from these men. I just thought that's just not possible. Statistically, it's not possible. So we took the names, and first we worked backward through shipping records, mostly in Bristol in the UK, to take those names and connect them to other sailors that were on ships. We were able to work backward. You couldn't see where they went after that, but you could go backward and see the previous ship they had been on, and then maybe the previous ship and maybe the previous ship. But that gave us Chinese names. And that was helpful because then we knew, well, what is where did these names come from? These names that we have, where did they come from? Are they coming from some kind of official document like a passport or an immigration ID of some kind? where are these names coming from? And then that also allowed us, based on the spellings of, well, what probably was their native language, or what was their native dialect, I should say. Were they Cantonese speakers? Were they Toisan speakers? Probably they were not Mandarin speakers. There wasn't that kind of immigration from the north at that time. So in one direction we were working backward, and then in the other direction we were looking for people who were looking for us. We were trying to find people who had posted on Titanic boards, and just where people go, where Titanic folks go to try to pick up information. What happened to my relative? These boards are still out there, they're still active today. And we managed to find a gentleman named Tom Fong, and he said, my father was on Titanic and he was rescued from the water. Well, that happened to line up with a name that we had on the passenger manifest named Fong Long, which also that individual had been rescued from the water. So it was really a lot of detective work. I had a wonderful research team, both, some were in the United States, some were in the UK, some were in Canada, some were in the office in Shanghai, and they were really able to kind of draw those lines. And in many cases, they were able to take the dotted lines and make them into solid ones. So it was really, there were definitely moments where we thought that this isn't going anywhere. We're never going to find these people. There just isn't enough information out there to do this. So, but at those moments, that's really when you need to say, no, I'm going to give this 30 more days, or I'm going to do 10 more searches, or whatever it is. That's when you really have to say, there's got to be more to this, and I need to go find it.
And what a gift you gave to that family. You've changed that family's life forever. And by the way, it also made for a very compelling part of your documentary, and consequently the book, which I have had the pleasure of reading in advance. I liked that you had the extra information that wasn't in the documentary, and I appreciate, in addition to your filmmaking, what I really appreciated was the forensics involved, not just with tracking down the family, but the reconstruction of the lifeboat to sort of vindicate their rescue. Because, talk a little bit, if you can, please, about the swirl of controversy and the prejudice against these survivors. Like, it wasn't enough to have to go through the Titanic disaster and survive it, but the ongoing persecution, I think, is a fair word to use.
So we were very fortunate that 4 of the 6 survivors got off in the same lifeboat as J. Bruce Ismay. Otherwise, I really wonder if we would have been able to do this, because Ismay, acknowledging them, brought them up in the testimony, in the 2 inquiries, both in the UK and the US. They were really questioning Ismay and saying, so Mr. Ismay, you were a male in this boat, when we're loading boats with a women and children first or only policy, and how many other men were in the boat with you? And it's definitely a curled lip question, not only toward Ismay himself, but also, Ismay's in a really tough position, because on the one hand, he's trying to defend himself and just say, hey, I almost fell in the boat kind of right at the end, and I almost survived by chance. But then you have these 4 Chinese men in the boat. They used a different term in the testimony that I won't use, but there are these other 4 men in the, certainly 4 Asian men in the boat, and Ismay also doesn't want to be painted with the brush that, hey, I'm like them, because they were viewed very negatively. Their survival was viewed very negatively. Like, how dare those men survive when so many women and children didn't make it? And so, we felt if we were going to do this, this is really where we are in Titanic research today. We have fantastic tools. Again, it's something where things are moving in opposite directions. We are moving away from the era of, obviously we don't have any first person testimony anymore. The remaining survivors are long gone. Even in many cases, the children, and in some cases, the grandchildren, are also no longer with us. So we're now down to sort of third and fourth hand accounts in terms of anybody who's going to tell the story. We still have lots of records, but now we have an advantage that we never had before, which was Google and AI, and those kinds of tools that can take something that would have previously taken weeks of poring over documents in an archive and, get the reading glasses out and, take photos or make photocopies. And we don't have to do that anymore. Now, within the space of a day, maybe even shorter, we can get the answers to our questions, which is an advantage that researchers never had before. We also have so much better technology in terms of looking at the wreck, in terms of looking at the physical evidence. And that's really what we wanted to do. We thought, well, the true arbiter here is physics. If they're saying that four men hid underneath the slats, the seats in the lifeboat, well, we can build a lifeboat and we can put four people in it or more people and see if that worked. And so that's what we had to do. I was committed to that from the beginning, because there was no point in so much of what we see in Titanic research now is really just kind of a rehash. We love the story and we love the legends and we have our favorite characters and we picture ourselves, on the bow or stepping back from the rail or swimming forward or whatever it is. But the reality is that the factual story is what's going to continue to drive us forward. And the only way that we do that is to apply the tools that we now have to things that we've thought or that we've wondered about for a long time. And this was one of those cases. So we worked with an international high school in Beijing, Western Academy of Beijing, and we supplied the materials. They built the boat, and then they supplied the students who were about the right size for 1912 people. And we put real people in the boat because as both of you know, and as many of our listeners know, the Titanic audience, the Titanic research community, let's say, is a really tough bunch. They really know their stuff, and they've spent a long time learning how far apart each porthole is, each window, what the size of it is, where the glass came from. So you can't make a mistake. You can't just build a 6-foot model and stick Kens and Barbies in it and then claim a discovery. You've really got to do it. And so that was in the back of my head the whole time was I don't want those people to say that we didn't do our homework, that we didn't do it right. And
Even now, I confess that's why I wanted you to read my book, because I was like, if there's a mistake in there, Steven will be the one to catch it.
Yeah.
I will maintain, even on a fictional basis or historical retelling of stories in film, in books, yes, of course, but in films, filmmakers, if you're going to tell a true story, you have a responsibility to tell it well and truthfully, because so many people, documentary or feature narrative, that's how they receive their history now. People don't read history books. People's first experience of a historical story will potentially be through a movie, and then they'll find the book because it cracks open their passion and their interest to know more. So it's, and then documentaries take it to another level where, we're going to get, as you said, we're going to get found out, or somebody's going to have an itch they need to scratch if it's not quite how they see how they perceive what happened.
The greatest compliment I've received so far on the book is when people have offered advanced praise that refer to meticulous research. And that's not just a credit to me, that's a credit to our team. Our team did such a wonderful job. But that was the whole point. If we were accused and warned very early on by a prominent member of the Titanic community that we shouldn't attempt to, quote, sugarcoat this story because we lived in China and that we were, maybe doing this for a Chinese audience, trying to curry favor with the Chinese audience.
I would challenge, though, that there's not many of those historians who know the story or have researched the story in the way that you have, this particular story, that you are the lead storyteller on it. So they now have to go and do their own research to find out any holes that.
And you were already an established authority on shipwreck and an established authority on Chinese shipwreck. You have that credibility.
But that, except for people who are absolutely at the top of the field, when it comes to Titanic is just different. I had this conversation with somebody the other night, and Titanic is just different. It's just in many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways, it is so well documented. That's one of the reasons that you can't make a factual error, because it's there and you can search it and you can find out the length of something, or just every time someone says that more than 415 people 1,500 people died, the people who suddenly rise, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them for wanting to correct the record, but it's a pretty ravenous bunch. But I think more importantly than any of that, kind of measuring contest, we owe it to those people that we are documenting. We owed it to the Chinese passengers. When we do work on Titanic, we owe it to Captain Smith. We owe it to the various people involved in the story, because it is their story we're telling. Obviously, we all have our own motivations for telling the stories that we want to tell, but the reality is that these are real people, and maybe they did make a mistake. Maybe they did have bad judgment. Maybe they didn't act the way that they should have, but we owe it to them to be accurate. We if you're making a fictional film, or you're writing a piece of fiction, you get some license, you get some room to play with. But especially for us with a documentary, I put myself in cold water to answer a question, because you can do that. That was something we were able to do and say once and for all, okay, it would have been like this. He would have had 20 functional minutes in that water before he would have been incapacitated. How many students can how many people can you fit in a lifeboat that's this size? Can people fit underneath? If you're sitting here where Ismay sat and you're looking toward the bow, can you even see those people? And it's one of my favorite lines, and Arthur absolutely hates it when I keep saying this, but I say it all the time. It's from the movie Ronin, that stars Robert De Niro, and I think it was directed by John Frankenheimer. It's just kind of a fun chase movie. But at one point, De Niro he's looking at a map on the wall, and he says, the map is not the territory. And that is absolutely it. And we didn't understand the situation with the lifeboat and the Chinese survivors until I was sitting in the lifeboat, like Ismay had, on a bright sunny day, and I couldn't see the men in the bow. And that was it. And it proved that there was no malice, there was no deception. It wasn't about racism. It was simply about sight lines. It was a simple physics problem. But unless we did what we did, unless we built the boat and sat in it and put people in it, we never would have known that. And I mean, that's a long way to go
huge
to
breakthrough.
it's a
In
long
that
way to go
moment,
to
you're
prove
like,
a small point,
Eureka!
but but was it worth it? Yeah, it was totally worth it, because we gave these men their honor back after more than a century. Okay, were they heroes? No, they weren't heroes, but they weren't villains either. They
But they
didn't
were
pick up
there too.
anybody.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't pick
And they
anybody up
survived.
and throw
They
them
went,
out of the
and
boat. You
the
know,
bottom line is they went on to have a life beyond the Titanic. Now,
absolutely.
some of us wonder if we'll ever have a life beyond the Titanic. What year did your Titanic? I mean, obviously you've always been interested in it, but like, when did you in earnest begin your Titanic journey? And how much, now that you've done the documentary and now you've got the book coming out, how much further do you have to go?
Oh dear. It's to quote another movie line, it pulls you back in. So, um, I mean, I've tried and failed to get a podcast going, Titanic, New Jersey, but I will return to it. It's just the six has taken up so much time that I just simply couldn't devote to any other aspect of it. I think, we all as the Titanic community really need to answer some key questions, like what else is it that we want out of Titanic? What are we still looking at? Why are we still squeezing this lemon and trying to get juice out of it? And what is that juice going to be, and why do we want it? I think the Titan disaster really put into perspective, are we going to continue to visit Titanic? Can we really not visit it? Is that realistic? we have the new 8K footage that was taken over the last year or two, which is spectacular. And now you can pilot an ROV virtually and go through it. But, are we spending our time on the right wreck? Are we spending our time on the right bit of history? And I think there's a legitimate case for it, but I think we really need to examine it carefully. It's not 1996 when, the wreck is still fresh and there's still a lot left to be found.
I think what I realized talking to the fans, our super fans, is that every generation has a new generation of people who are introduced to the story via the film or via documentary or whatever it is. And for some reason, this story will go on, and the legacy and the repeat interest will happen because somehow 6-year-olds are still absolutely captivated by the story of the Titanic.
Hey, I
And
love the Lusitania, I love the Andrea Doria, but it doesn't grab you the same way as
it
Titanic.
doesn't. And as long as, say, imagine a Titanic, somebody who's really interested in Titanic and then shows their 7-year-old or their 11-year-old what they know about Titanic, it will just keep going. And I've said many times, I was trying to answer the question more specifically about James Cameron's film because we had all been a part of it, and that film had introduced our super fans for the most part. And I failed. I couldn't answer the question. And I'm at the point now where it really doesn't matter. Why do we need to answer a question that continues to perpetuate because it's such a fascinating subject? And you saw me shake my head when you said, should we keep going down to the wreck? Of course, people, they're going to go down to the wreck when it's a shadow of an outline, of a shipwreck. There, hundreds of years from now, and by then, oh God forbid, I just went to. There'll be, walking tours. You'll be able to go down. I mean, forget I said that. I don't mean that.
Well, you've invoked the name James Cameron, Alexandra. So now we have to ask Stephen. We had a moment with Jim in your documentary. Tell us how he figures into the book.
So I mean, James Cameron and Maria Wilhelm, his business partner, have really been super supporters of the Six as a project. As soon as they became aware of it, they
Great.
made themselves available. They continue to be interested in it, and so James Cameron wrote the foreword for the book. He had written it for the Chinese edition, and it also appears in the UK edition and the US edition. So that's just fantastic. It's more than anything, to me it's just a stamp of approval. It's not. I mean, sure, the name is great, and maybe a couple people look at it and say, "Oh, wow, James Cameron," and they'll buy the book as a result, and that's great. I'm grateful for that. But really, I mean, James Cameron continues to be one of the great living Titanic experts. Okay, don't go to trivia night and try to take on James Cameron, in Titanic trivia. You're going to lose. And he continues to be interested in it, and he continues to look for ways to explore it. And he is also one of the great living underwater explorers of our time. So, for
And
him
with
to be a part of
75
it.
Avatar movies, I can't believe he hasn't conceived of some sequel to Titanic by now.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the twain shall meet. So let's see how that storyline plays out. But he was, and they were great supporters throughout. I sent them an early copy of the manuscript. But they were great, and they made so much available, especially for the documentary, some of the footage from Titanic that would have been very difficult for us to recreate otherwise. But I mean, it was obvious to us from the beginning that he knew a fair bit about it, and that he knew of the Chinese passengers, and that we wanted to know what he knew and what his team knew. Did they have a file on the Chinese passengers that we could read? So it was great, working with him, and he was nothing but patient and supportive. And it's when people say don't meet your heroes, I think that's such a mistake. But if you want to just shake their hand and get an autograph, okay, that's fine. Maybe they'll turn you down, maybe they won't. But if you really want to meet your heroes, bring something to the table. Bring something, work with your heroes. Don't meet your heroes, work with your heroes. If they're really your hero, then you take yourself to that level and you say, hey, by the way, Mr. Cameron, here's what I can do with you. That's the way to approach it. And I think that's what we did. And I think that's why they were so interested and so supportive of our work.
I was going to say maybe a better word than hero is mentor. If you consider someone who you feel is a hero to you, uh, become their mentee in a way, and then you become colleagues, which is marvelous. Please, Stephen, tell us. For now, everybody's going to be hyped up and excited to read your book. Just let us know the specifics. I know you've got travels affiliated with the book as well. This may or may not time with when individuals may be listening to this podcast, but just in case it works out, what's coming up?
So the book will be published in the UK on April 3rd from the History Press UK. It will be published in the US on April 8th by Pegasus Books, which is a Simon & Schuster imprint. I probably by the time this goes out, I will have already come back from the Hong Kong International Literary Festival to launch the book without books, but that's okay. And
That's what Amazon is for.
Indeed, the first couple talks are the book is launching officially on April 1st at the Boulder Bookstore in Boulder, Colorado, which is a homecoming for me of sorts. I saw so many great authors speak there when I was at the University of Colorado. It's a dream about to come true. And then I'll be in Denver at the Tattered Cover the following night, and then Asbury Park Book Cooperative on April 12th, which is sort of my local friends and family talk, and then I'll be speaking at the Explorers Club on April 14th in New York City, which is if I do not break into tears at any point during that talk, then I didn't do it right. So it's wonderful to be able to go out and represent this work in different places.
So I had the good fortune of being Stephen's guest at the Explorers Club, and a couple of our Titanic friends from Titanic Talk were there as well, L.A. Reid Beatles and Pablo Ohana. And I kind of really like that this Titanic community, we all sort of get along, and there, at least from what I've gathered, there don't seem to be any cliques within the cliques. We're all just, in it together.
I'm not sure that I agree with you fully. I mean, I think there are definitely different subgroups of Titaniacs. Some people are just super fans, and that's great. As any the main character in Misery once said, fan love is the purest love. And I think that's true, certainly to a point. I think there is some competition among the researchers because, the reality is that a lot about Titanic is known. And so to do something fresh now, I mean, I happen to stumble into a dusty, unexamined corner of Titanic history. If I had approached it head on, said, I'm going to write a fresh new um, history of Titanic, I don't know that I would have been able to do it, or certainly not do it meaningfully. But I think we any time a group of people have a common interest and a common love, that there's a bond that's created because you understand the journey that the other people have gone through to get there. You understand your own the way you discovered it, and then how you took it forward. And it's really nice to meet other people who can do, who have similar interests and can teach you something about it that you don't know. So, I mean, Ellie's podcast has been fantastic, and I think really saved a lot of people during the COVID era, or at least save their ears, and it's just it's I was because of our early experiences with some of the Titanic folks when we were doing the research. I ended up being very wary of the Titanic community just because I didn't want to reveal too much too early because I didn't want anyone to jump our claim, although that wasn't too big a worry. But also at the same time, when you have tough moments in research where answers are just not coming, and if you have somebody off to the side saying you're wasting your time, we already know about these people, don't try to sugarcoat it. It can be very discouraging. And so it's what to quote Stephen King again in his fine book on writing, there's a time when you write with the door closed, and that's your first draft. And Nelson, you know this well from your process. There's a time when you write with the door closed, and then there's a time when you write with the door open, when you're willing to share it and start to get the feedback that you need to make it a finished work. So, almost universally, my contact with the Titanic community has been very positive. But we'll see. When the book comes
There's
out,
always one, Stephen. There's always one.
Yeah, yeah.
There's also always.
Well, now there's always 6.
Yes, indeed. And then there was 6.
Nice.
And so with that, we will say for all of you that think you know everything about the Titanic, you need to get the 6 by Steven Schwankert. And if you haven't seen the documentary, also highly, highly recommended. And we're so grateful and can't wait to see what you come up with next, Steven.
Thank you both. Thanks for having me, and it's great to be among people who have produced so much good work on their own.
We're humbled by your company. Thank you so much, Steven.
Take care.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited. We've launched a line of Titanic Talk merch. A cap, a mug, a tote, a t-shirt or a hoodie. You'll be sure to find a unique gift for the Titaniac in your life. Look for the link in the notes and on Instagram, or go to bit.ly/Titanic Talk Shop.